in American football. And as some of you know, a study was made this past year in which they were asked, those that participated, those experts, to pick the greatest football program in intercollegiate sports for the past 75 years based on the number of times that that team was in the top 10 rankings consistently year after year after year. And here, a place where we started with nothing but a barren field and with a few rugged young men who were taught how to play football because it was a new sport, here we stand in the midst of the greatest football program declared by the experts in the last 75 years in the United States of America. And so we have so much to celebrate, and we also have so much to remember. A great historian, David McCullough, once said, "You don't remain great unless you know how you became great in the first place, and unless you remember how you became great in the first place." And that's exactly what we do here today, as we literally stand next to our field of dreams, a great tradition that was started here, carried on by those that came afterward, carried on by Barry Switzer, carried on today, and we'll see another victory to add to our home victory streak this afternoon with Bob Stoops. But it was literally a field of dreams because the people who came here in those pioneer times really had no possessions. They had a sense of possibility for their lives, they had their determination, they had their dreams, and they had the courage to live out their dreams. And from the very beginning, this university decided in athletics we would set the standards high. And the very first football coach, who was not really hired as football coach, but as English professor at this university, was Vernon Parrington. The Parrington Oval at the north end of the campus is named for him. He came here as an English professor, but he'd been at Harvard, and that was about the only place that had football back then. So Dr. Boyd said, "Why don't you form a team?" And it was formed, first of all, down at Bud Reisinger's barber shop down on Main Street. And so that's what happened. By the way, they didn't have enough legal players, so the barber had to play as well. In that first game, which they lost to Oklahoma City High School. Not an auspicious beginning. But that's where it all started. By the way, Parrington went on to win the Pulitzer Prize in intellectual history. I love to say that we had, as our first football coach, the only university in the nation can say our first football coach won the Pulitzer Prize in intellectual history. But he was a volunteer coach. Our first real coach is one of the two people we celebrate today. It was Bennie Owen, who came here in 1905. He'd been quarterback at Kansas. He'd coached at Washburn. He'd coached at Bethany College in Kansas. And he came here and he set the standard that he would try to reach as having the best football program in the United States. And before he was through, he achieved that. And when we had so little to try to start the program with, that for his first year, his first paycheck, he accepted IOUs, literally IOUs on paper from the university, because Dr. Boyd didn't have enough to pay him his first year's salary. And for the sake of his family, and his daughter Dorothy is here today, and I would say that I've been a beneficiary of the Owen family because Dorothy and her late husband Tom were one of the first two people who helped me when I decided to enter public life. And so I'm the beneficiary of some of the values implanted by Bennie Owen in his own children. And so it's a sense of great continuity that I am here today to help all of you pay tribute to his incredible legacy. You know, he was such a creative man, and he set to mold young men, and he set to change their lives as well as coach them in football. And he said that good sportsmanship was the most important thing of all. He served here for 22 years as head football coach. That record today still stands. Bennie Owen was not only the first real football coach, he was the longest serving football coach of the Oklahoma Sooners in the history of this university. And his record, and that record has been carried on, that tradition which he said earlier has been carried on by Bud and Barry and Bob and others that have come after. 128 wins, 52 losses, 13 ties. We had ties, obviously, in those days, of course. And 9 undefeated teams while he was a coach at the University of Oklahoma. I only wish that they had had the national championships declared in the Bennie Owen days, or we'd have a good dozen up there on the scoreboard, and not just 7, but we're going to continue to add to those. He was an amazing man. He in many ways was the creator of the forward pass, and he had a great player named Park Geyer, who was the first person who really implemented the use of the forward pass in a remarkable way. And he did it. In the first year he did it, he completed 50 of 54 passes, leaving the defenses absolutely bewildered. And that was one of those undefeated teams that Bennie Owen created. He was a man who was an incredible role model for his players. He was an absolute teetotaler. He was very strong in his spirituality, although he didn't preach about it. He lived it, and he was that kind of role model. He never, ever, ever, just like Coach Stoops and Coach Switzer, he was never, ever heard to use profanity, ever, in a single time. In fact, they would say that when he got agitated and excited, rather than turn to profanity, he would just say, murder, 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 to urge on his teams to play even harder. What a remarkable legacy he leaves. On the front of the stadium, and I did this 9 or 10 years ago, as we were working on restoring the stadium and bricking the stadium and changing its appearance, I found a quote from Bennie Owen. And I had it put in a plaque on the side of the stadium, by the front door of the stadium. It says this: "It is with pleasure that I look back over the athletic history of the university, sprinkled with great successes and dotted with reverses. It has been a great struggle, growing from a child in swaddling clothes to be a member of one of the great athletic conferences in America. And I attribute this growth and success to one dominant trait that has lived through it all: good sportsmanship. Good sportsmanship involves playing the game for the love of competitive play, regardless of the outcome, in order that youth may grow and broaden of the influence of the values of the game, learn teamwork, discipline, sacrifice, the spirit of living a clean and wholesome life for the love of it. Whatever else is said of Oklahoma, it is said that she is a good sport, a good loser, a gracious victor. That is the spirit that brings victory even out of defeat. And above all else, that typifies the University of Oklahoma. It did then, it still does, thanks to the high standards and the traditions that were begun by Bennie Owen." What a privilege it is to be able to honor him. And then that tradition, which first was established and began to take root with Bennie Owen, was continued in the most remarkable way. In a way that brought back a sense of possibility to the lives of Oklahomans that in a way had lost that sense of possibility that they brought with them as pioneers to this place. We went through the Great Depression. We went through the days of the Dust Bowl. In many ways, Oklahomans had lost their sense of self-confidence. And then we had a man who came here in 1947 to be our head football coach. And he also would be satisfied with nothing less than excellence. And he built back the pride and self-confidence of all of the people of Oklahoma, not only through his victories, but through the kind of standards that he set as a man and that the members of his team set as men and citizens. And we will always have Bud Wilkinson and the great Sooner teams of that era to thank for giving us back our pride and our self-confidence as Oklahomans again.